Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hello again, people. Yeah, I know, I just filmed a few days ago, but one of the reasons that I was planning on doing a video today anyway was because of the weather. As I've said many times before, this garage has no heat in it. Winter, time is approaching, it's autumn, and today it was uncharacteristically warm. And really just today. Tomorrow's going to be a lot colder, supposedly. But silly me, I ended up waiting till, the sun's down now, it's evening, so now it's getting colder in here. Had I done this during the day, I would have been a lot warmer. But I was off visiting my dad, so I didn't get to do the video. And I've got this weird thing. I like recording my videos at night. I don't know, during the day, even, I'm inside, whatever, my attention is just all over the place because I'm just aware of, there's things going on outside of my condo building here and, landscapers and people coming and going and stuff like that. It's a little too hectic. So I prefer the nighttime. So I was planning on doing a video today anyway, but I had nothing to talk about. So I was just going to do some vinyl pulls. And I had one of these weird coincidences, and I swear, all these weird coincidences have only happened to me since I started, the last couple of years pretty much, since I started making videos. And this one doesn't actually involve anybody else except for me, but I did talk about this weird coincidence that I had, where I pulled out my Dave Grusin and my Don Grusin albums a couple weeks ago, just so I could compile and burn an MP3 disc to play in my car. I hadn't listened to their music in years, and the first day that I had the disc in my car and I was driving to visit my dad, the first album that came on that was on the MP3 disc was the Don Grusin album, and I'm listening to it. And as soon as I got to the room where he's in the physical rehab facility, I put on the TV, and I'm watching the show, which ended a few minutes later, and up on the credits for the show, it says Music by Dave Grusin. So I thought that was just a weird coincidence. So I had another one. So for no reason at all, just yesterday, I got the mood to listen to a Pat Metheny album I rarely listen to because I'm not a huge fan of it. Pat Metheny's Bright Size Life, his first solo album ever. It's just a trio. Pat Metheny and fairly early in his career, Jaco Pastorius on bass and Bob Moses on drums. So this is one of the more stripped down albums of his career, and his first solo album, recorded in December '75, and it came out in '76. And this is a lot more really basic. It's pretty much just electric bass, simple drum kit, not a lot of overdubs, and just pretty much 6-string electric guitar. Now there's and that's it. And as you know, Pat Metheny, he's credited here also playing electric 12-string, but I don't hear it. I don't hear the electric 12-string. I hear it on his next album, Watercolors, but I don't hear it on here. And it's pretty much very basic. There's no keyboards, no guests, no additional musicians. Metheny doesn't play acoustic guitar, no guitar synthesizers. So, which he's known on his future albums pretty much for having a variety of instruments, of various types of guitars and guitar synthesizers and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and so this one is very basic because it's pretty much just a 6-string electric guitar throughout the whole disc. I think there's only one track that is a guitar solo, in that there's no bass and drums on there. There's 2 overdubbed guitars on there. So there's like a rhythm part and a lead part, which is probably my favorite piece on the album. And apart from that, it's pretty much straight trio stuff. Most of it live. pretty much, without guitar overdubs, and maybe a couple tracks do have a second guitar overdubbed, like a rhythm and lead part. But it's very basically that very clean sound. He doesn't alter his sound a whole lot in this. Wasn't quite using that softer like digital delay sound that he had on the first Pat Metheny Group album, which was 2 albums after this. And this is one I have. Now I listened on CD. I don't spin my albums anymore. But I just pulled the album out so I could show it because it looks better than a CD on the screen. So and I'm not. I have over 30 Pat Metheny albums. I should have counted them before I did this video. And yet I don't consider myself a fan. He's got such this loyal fan base that even when he comes out with an album, it's not even worth reading the fan reviews of on Amazon, which I always do for any artist I even care a little bit about. But he's got that kind of following that everything is great. Everything he does is great. And, this is his best album or one of his best albums or best he's done in years. You hear that with every single album he puts out. And any dissenting votes, anytime somebody might enter slightly negative or critical review of an album, they get torn apart. I mean, I just don't like that kind of rabid following, like he was the Beatles or something like that. It's just, I think the Beatles even are, you can say more criticism about their music than you can with the Metheny fans. So, like, as far as, reading reviews of Metheny, it's almost worthless. So I don't consider myself a fan, and I have a ton of albums by him, including a much later, I want to say probably in the late 90s, a rare trio album that he did of just guitar, bass, and drums, which is a lot different than Bright Size Life, though. So I just had the desire to hear it, and I rarely ever listen to that one anymore. And one of the reasons is because I do listen a bit to the 2 volumes of Works, Pat Metheny's Works compilation that ECM put out. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 tracks, I want to say 4 tracks from Bright Size Life on those compilations. And 3 of the tracks are tracks I can't stand at all. So if anything, it kind of, and there's only 8 tracks on the album. So if anything, it kind of creates a negative opinion looking back on the album. But then I realized that there's other tracks that I do like, much more than the ones they included on the Works compilations. But it's never enough to make me pull back and go back and listen to Bright Size Life. But for some reason, I just got that desire to hear him in that stripped down setting. Now, I have a ton of guitar trio recordings of guitar, bass, and drums, especially in the jazz realm. So, usually when I want to hear that, I don't put on, like, a Pat Metheny album. But for some reason, I was just in the mood to hear, the Pat Metheny thing, and there's no ballads. 7 of the 8 tracks are originals, and their tracks, a couple of them have been recorded in other places. I want to say maybe 1 or 2 of them were recorded with Gary Burton, too, when he was in Gary Burton's band. And when I want to hear early Pat Metheny, I tend to go more to the Gary Burton's Passengers album than anything else. But for some reason, I wanted to hear Bright Size Life. I just wanted to hear that very simple 6-string guitar, bass, drums thing going on. So I listened to it. Yeah, that was great. And then today, I had this odd coincidence where, and this is totally unrelated to Pat now. There used to be a distribution company, and it was based out in New Jersey, but what they did is they distributed European jazz albums, mostly CDs, because this was in the late 80s, I guess it was about the mid-90s. Company was called DA Music, and if you buy a lot of imports CDs, I don't think they were really doing vinyl. Vinyl was pretty much gone at that point. But if you have a lot of import albums on a few different labels, the Mood label was one of the big ones. Mood Records, and several other labels, probably based in Germany, were distributed by this company that was based out of New Jersey called DA Music. Now, at the time, you could go into any physical record store that had a jazz section and easily find their stuff. I don't know if that's because the distribution company was here in Jersey, but I got the feeling that their distribution at the time pretty much got all over the United States. Well, fast forward, and I have a bunch of these releases. Fast forward to about 15 years later, or 12 years later, whatever it is, and surprisingly, DA Music goes out of business. And I'm not sure what they were. I'm not sure if they were just an American company that did the distribution for some of these German and these small jazz labels over here in the U.S., or whether it was a branch of a European company that was based in the U.S., but for whatever reason, they closed down their distribution arm. And with that, these albums on like the Mood record label and places like that, stopped being available here in the U.S. You could buy them as imports, maybe, depending on what label it was and what album it was. Perhaps somebody else may have picked them up for distribution, but for the most part, unless they were a big artist very well known in America, the DA Records stuff went bye-bye. And a couple of the things that I liked very much that were on there that were very easy to get on CD at the time was something like the Miroslav album from I want to say recorded in 76 and 77. That was one of the things that they released that I actually bought on album back in the day, and then DA Music distributed the CD when it came out on CD once that era hit. And they did a couple Randy Weston albums that I have, and maybe the Randy Weston albums may have been picked up because he's a fairly well-known American artist. But these DA Music releases, and a lot of them on Mood Records, I think Robert Schroeder was another one, the electronic artist, and his stuff, since they went out of business, those, 10 albums or so, whatever they distributed by him, haven't been available here in the U.S. since DA Music went bye-bye. And they also had some artists that here in America are pretty much totally unknown, and possibly in Europe too. Not necessarily big jazz artists or well known at all. And those things did not see, for the most part, distribution here in the U.S. again. So in DA Music, I had ordered a bunch of stuff from them by mail order when they were still here. And one day I get this notice that basically, I don't know if they announced that they were going out of business, but that's essentially what it was. And you could, for, like $25 or $50, whatever it was, get like 25 randomly selected CDs. They were just taking their stock and just selling all their stock. And these were new CDs. They were sealed, but they were mainly cutouts. They had the little cutout notch on the spine, like you would see here. If you could see that, But apart from that, they were new. And I think they had a bigger deal. I could have, for $100, I could have probably gotten 50 or something. I forgot what I got. I remember ordering this big box, and maybe I was not so aware at the time that they were going out of business. Also, this was before the online stuff really hit. Had this sale happened now, I would just buy 500 CDs or whatever with the eye toward reselling them. But back then, the Amazons weren't around yet, and things weren't being sold as much online. So it was like, well, what am I going to do with all these? So I went for one of the sets. I want to say I probably got, I can picture the box coming in the mail with all the CDs in my mind, and maybe it was, it might have been as many as 50 CDs in there. And only a couple were ones that I had. A couple were by artists I'd never heard of, which is, kind of the thing that you are looking for, because for next to nothing you're getting to sample these. And over the years, and this was a number of years ago now, I want to say this is probably about a dozen years ago. And over the years, I have given most of these away. I kept them all together at one point in a big storage box, a plastic storage box. So I knew that these were the ones that I got at this big budget price. But by the time I moved here 5 years ago, they were pretty much all gone. And I don't know where they went. I mean, some of them went into my private collection, because they were things that I was interested in hearing. And I played, and even if I didn't like them, I kept them. Others were maybe duplicates of things I already had, so I gave them away. What amazes me, though, is that I really don't have any of them left, except for I have a small handful left, but probably less than 10. And those are apart from the ones that I kept. But I mean, there's I might have 10 that are like duplicates that I still have of things. And out of all of those that I have left, though, there was only two. Where's my fingers? Two. There was two that I never opened, and to be honest, they didn't look that interesting to me. I kept them; they were still sealed, and I just never opened them. They were a couple albums that had no musicians I'd ever heard of. They're roughly in the jazz realm, I guess. I never really even did an internet search to find out about them. And one of them, I decided for no reason at all, I picked up. I'm always walking by this. It's on a shelf in my place here that I walk by and I see it a lot. And I have for a couple years, more than a couple years now. And it's just one that I always kind of eyeball. I don't know anything about it's three musicians. They don't even list on the CD what instruments they play. For some reason, I figured it was a piano trio. And it's called the Sagmeister Trio, which is Michael Sagmeister, who's the leader. And it's an album recorded in Germany. So he's a German musician in 1978. And for some reason, and every once in a while I just pick it up and I look at it, and I'm very frustrated by the fact it was sealed, that they don't list the instruments on there. And for some reason I thought it was a piano band, and I didn't know any of the three musicians involved. And when I took a look at it yesterday, I pulled it off the shelf again. I saw Volker Kriegel's name on there, which I had never noticed before. And I made sure to look to see if there was a guest appearance by Volker Kriegel, the late German guitarist who I liked very much, and who was a partner of Eberhard Weber's, played with him a lot. He was in the United Jazz and Rock Ensemble. He was one of the founding members of that, and he played with them until he passed away. But just reading it, it seems like all the stuff in the back is in German, so they didn't even, interestingly, do really an American and English translation. But it looked like Volker Kriegel was just credited with supervision and some other German word that I don't know what it means. But it didn't look like he was playing on it as a guest. But I hadn't seen a lot of albums that had a production credit by Volker Kriegel. And I think it's possible he was part owner of Mood Records, now that I think about it. And I think he was, which may be why, his name might appear like a Manfred Eicher would appear on an ECM album. Yeah, now that I think about it, I think he was part owner of Mood Records, so he could be the overall, essentially the producer, which may be why his name appeared on it. But after seeing his name on it, I got a little curious, and I decided to open the CD and play it. Well, actually, first I went on YouTube to see if there were any tracks from the album. Hopefully, the whole album would be up there, so I could hear it, because I'm not sure if I wanted to open it. And there's one track which I'm going to try to remember to link. I created a little folder because it turns out the leader of the band is this Michael Sagmeister, is a guitarist after all. Had I known this was a guitar trio, I probably would have played it. I would have played it years ago. I found a single track, one track only, on YouTube from this album, but there's a whole bunch of other Michael Sagmeister tracks from individual albums on YouTube, a lot. I think it was 117 that I found. And even though he was German, he played with Pat Martino. He made some records, or at least one album with Pat Martino, the American guitarist based in Philadelphia. I don't know how they hooked up. Excuse me. It's a good thing I keep something to drink nearby. I always try to keep something to drink nearby, and I almost never need it when I'm making a video. So through the years, it appears that he's still active. His last record that I looked up was just a few years ago, I think. This Michael Sagmeister, back in 1978, was apparently very, very young. So I opened the CD after hearing this one track, and it struck me quite odd because it sounded like Bright Size Life. So here is this album that I just pulled out and listened to again for the first time in years, yesterday, and a couple hours later, something drives me to pull the CD off of my shelf that I've had for between 12 and 15 years and never listened to. And I find this one YouTube track, and I'm like, gee, it's guitar, electric bass, and drums. And on the one track I heard, it sounds amazing. It sounds like something that could come off from Bright Size Life. Now, Bright Size Life, that Pat Metheny album, sounds a little bit different than any other Pat Metheny albums. So it's quite unusual that this one album that I just randomly picked out by these totally unknown musicians to me, and I was in the mood to hear that kind of thing, would sound just like that album that I wanted to hear, because I wanted to hear that kind of sound. So after hearing that one short track from the album, I'm like, now I got to open it and listen to it. So I opened the CD, I listened to it, and I'm shocked by the coincidence. First of all, it's got 8 tracks, just like the Pat Metheny group album does, the Pat Metheny Bright Size Life does. It's got the same exact lineup with electric bass, not upright bass, but electric bass, drums, and electric guitar. And it's pretty much the same thing. And honestly, you could take this album, copy all the tracks over, and sell it as outtakes from the Bright Size Life sessions, because it sounds like it just sounds like a continuation of Bright Size Life. Now, this was recorded in 1978. By that time, Pat Metheny had only about 2 albums out, or his third album was about ready to be released. He wasn't a big name then, and I kind of doubt he was a big name in Germany, especially, which is where these guys were, these musicians are based out of. It's just a guitar, electric bass, and drum session, just like Bright Size Life. It's got 8 tracks, just like Bright Size Life. It sounds like Bright Size Life. The guitar has the same exact sound that Metheny has on the Bright Size Life album. And exactly the same. And the length of the album is almost identical. The Bright Size Life is 37 minutes and change. Sagmeister Trio is 38 minutes. And the interesting thing is how much the electric bass player sounds like the way Jaco Pastorius sounds on Bright Size Life. Now, if you're real familiar with Jaco I'm not a fan of Jaco's playing at all, okay? But as far as the aggression and the busyness of his playing, which came pretty much around like 78 or so, if you listen to Jaco on Bright Size Life, he's a lot more subdued than the kind of playing that he was known for. I want to say laid back, but yeah, that's probably true. His playing wasn't as busy. He wasn't, necessarily just playing a zillion notes because he could type of thing. And it's odd how much this bass player sounds like Jaco, but specifically the way that Jaco was playing on Bright Size Life. I am 100% sure that these guys at this stage, when they recorded this album in 1978, had probably not heard Bright Size Life. It had only been out at that point for a couple years at the point that they recorded this, and Metheny, I don't think, was a big star in Germany at that point yet. And as far as the bass player sounding like Jaco wasn't that big yet. Jaco only started in Weather Report, I think, in 75 or 76. So his reputation was being made while the Sagmeister Trio was there, but in 78 he was just starting to get the kind of attention in America that became the legend of Jaco. So this bassist, Udo Kistner, Kistner, which I know nothing about the musicians on here, had obviously been playing for a whole bunch of years. So it's not like he grew up being influenced by Jaco, because Jaco was only around pretty much for a couple years before this was recording. And I mean, Jaco was only recording for literally a couple of years, and the bass player on here had obviously been playing for some time, and I don't think he would have been influenced that quickly and sounded that much like Jaco in the matter of, hearing Jaco play maybe a few months prior to this. So it's interesting how similar the electric bass style is to the way Jaco plays on this. And again, not the way Jaco plays on most of his other albums, because his playing got real busy real fast and very, very hyperactive, by 78 or 79 or so. So it was weird. And the thing is, this isn't recorded in the ECM studios, but it has the same sound. The way that the drums and the bass and the guitar are recorded, it sounds like the Bright Size Life recording. Like I said, you could easily fool somebody and copy these songs and said, here's a bunch of outtakes and songs I recorded for Bright Size Life that they didn't use. And it's just weird, because I've had this, like I said, for between 12 and 15 years and never played it. And all of a sudden I got in the mood to hear this, this type of album, like the Bright Size Life music, which made me pull out the Pat Metheny album. And then a matter of a couple hours later, I start playing this. It's just one of those weird coincidences. And probably if I had more money and I was working, I wouldn't have pulled this out at this stage. But I'm going back into my archives, so to speak, and I'm revisiting albums. And I think I'm probably going to be doing a bit more of that. I have been, to a certain extent. I mean, the thing that made me pick out the Dave Grusin and Don Grusin albums that I hadn't played in a decade is simply the fact that I'm still buying some new CDs, but not like I used to, and so I'm going back into the archives. But once in a while, it's interesting to note that you go back into the archives, or I go back into my old stuff, and I like to re-examine not the albums that I loved and that I know really well, but the ones that didn't hit me at first, or I didn't really understand what was going on, which is, like, for instance, a lot of classical music, and revisit those. And sometimes it just takes years of your listening becoming more sophisticated to really appreciate. So I'm jumping back and I'm pulling out things that I only gave a couple spins to, and kind of put on the shelf because they didn't really do it for me, for various reasons. Not because they were too commercial, because the two commercial ones I still don't like, but there's others that are kind of like, you don't understand the direction, or it doesn't speak to you immediately. Those are the ones I like to go back to. And, if I find and I pull out any of those, I'll probably start doing a series of things that I'm listening to, or, a series where that consists of albums that I really love a lot, but that I didn't get at first, and I kind of put on the shelf and I left there for years, which is why I never get rid of pretty much almost any of my albums or CDs, is because of that factors. I often buy things that are kind of way over my head, and if I don't like them at first, I might put them on the shelf thinking, I might never listen to that again, but I'm keeping it anyway. And then I, at some point do get back to them, and sometimes it's like, oh, I get it now. And there's some album, I can't recall what it is recently, that I had that experience with. But when and if I come across that particular album, I'll do a video on it, because it could be a whole series of things that were just over my head that I didn't appreciate, or I didn't understand the direction of, or wasn't really in the mood to hear it at that time, that years later I pull off a shelf and they become favorites of mine. And so that's it. I can't believe I'm talking about 2 albums here, and the strange coincidence, and it's a half hour. So I'm not going to do any vinyl pulls, but I will next time. I'm going to come out here and do videos as often as the weather permits, because it's coming to an end soon. Within probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks tops, probably more like 3 weeks. It's probably going to be too cold to come out here and film. So I think, and when I'm going to do my future videos indoors, I won't have my stacks of vinyl. I do have some indoors, but I don't have them set up so I could just randomly pull them. So I brought a bunch of additional vinyls out tonight. I took a fistful, about that many albums, and I filled the back shelf. I have a small gap in there from the albums that I pulled out for my various videos. And I took a random selection, I don't even know what's in there, and kind of filled the gap in there, and hoping that, it's not just more ECM, which it probably is, and Klaus Schulze album, which it isn't, because all my Klaus Schulze albums are already back in there. So hopefully there'll be a little more variety when I do my future vinyl pulls. And, next time the weather permits, I'll come out here and do another video, and I may not have anything to talk about again. And I might just do nothing but vinyl pulls and fill up some time doing that. And I was going to do some today, but this is already going too long. So I just, just one of those weird coincidences that happen when you're a music fan, I guess. I think the only people that would understand this are people that are hardcore music fans that had something like this odd coincidence happen. I don't know anything about Michael Sagmeister and the Sagmeister Trio. All I know is, last I knew, he was still alive when I looked him up today, and made a whole bunch of albums as a guitarist, and is a teacher, has been teaching, I guess, a jazz guitar, probably, somewhere in Europe. He taught at Berkeley, believe it or not, for a while. He actually came to America and taught at Berkeley for a number of years, which I just found out today. A good guitarist, by the way. I quite enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, dare I say, the Pat Metheny fans come after me. I actually like the Sagmeister Trio better than Bright Size Life. And just from the, I've actually spun it about 3 times today. But it's right in that same direction. If you love Bright Size Life, and now the odd thing is, I talked about how these are out of print, but when I went on Amazon, there's actually copies there. Very, very strange. I'm sure this is out of print in America. I don't know. Maybe they're carrying copies over from Europe, or these are just leftover copies. I don't see this being a big seller. So I saw them on Amazon. I didn't look anywhere else for them. So that's what's going on. Unlike most of my videos where I play my own music underneath, I've been playing the Sagmeister Trio. I hope it's probably quiet enough. You probably can't really hear it. And if you can, maybe you'll get a little taste of it. And I hope I don't get any kind of copyright issues. I kind of doubt it. This is pretty obscure, and there's no cover tunes on here, which is where you run into a lot of problems. All these originals by Michael Sagmeister on here, and he's already got, like I said, 117 tracks on YouTube. And I will put the link for the folder. I put just a couple. Oh, here's another coincidence. This is the big one. Here's the thing that really connects them. I can't believe I almost forgot this. So I'm looking online on YouTube, and I see that in, I think it was 1992, Lyle Mays, the keyboard player of the Pat Metheny group, did at least some type of tour. He did some concerts. There is a concert filmed from TV in Germany. So it was a performance in a TV studio in Germany of a Lyle Mays band. And I want to say, I think it's from 92, but you know what? I took the video and I put it in the same folder as the Michael Sagmeister track, so you could see it. So Lyle Mays is playing in this German studio with this fantastic band. He's got Steve Rodby from the Pat Metheny group, which is maybe not a surprise. But he's got William Kennedy from my favorite drummer that the Yellow Jackets ever had. So he was in the Yellow Jackets for a lot of years and is back in the Yellow Jackets now. He had Dave Samuels on vibraphone. This was a hell of a band. I never knew these guys played together. But here's the weird thing. There's a guitarist in the group. The guitarist is Michael Sagmeister. All this happened today. You know, the whole thing with playing Bright Size Life. I opened this album. It struck me how much it sounds like Pat Metheny. You know, there's 8 compositions. The running time of the album is the same as the Pat Metheny group album. Pat Metheny solo album, not group album. But the one thing that is the most unlikely, and really the one thing that connects them, is apparently Michael Sagmeister was somehow picked by Lyle Mays to play in his band at some point. And that really blew me away. That really blew me away. So there's there's even more of a weird coincidence. That's the fact that made me want to make the video, and then I almost completely forgot to mention it. So that's just weird. It's just weird. So, and I don't think I know Lyle Mays. I know there was a live album, of an old performance that came out of his not that long ago, but I don't think it was that band that had Michael Sagmeister on it. But you can see the video to see that Michael Sagmeister is playing with Lyle Mays, and it is in my folder that I will try to remember to link. So I'll be back to talk about, probably just do some vinyl pulls from the back shelf, the back shelf, the back shelf. I still don't have the hand thing right. And hope everybody's doing well. I will be back. Take care. Dig the music for a minute. Here, I'll turn it up a little bit. Okay, I don't want to get the copyright thing. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you later.